Morning. Sound good? Okay. All right, good to see all of you today. Yeah, so I have been exploring a text book by Tigan Dan Layton, I think it is, called Just This Is It. And so I'm going to be exploring a koan from that book, and in with the koan are some of the commentaries by the author. And I found this very interesting. It was a good practice because, as some of you might have found out in your studies and reviewing some of the literature of Zen and these teachings, there's more than meets the eye, right? And so this particular koan had some historical background that really eluded me when I first looked at it. I really didn't quite understand what I was reading. And so the author's commentary on this were very helpful. And I spent quite a while actually sifting through this. And so what I'm going to do is read the koan and then break down the koan. And then there's some additional sort of topics that get pulled out of the koan as well that help bring out more of the koan. And so we'll go through it in that way. So this is the Book of Serenity, case 56. And so the case: as Dong Shan and his spiritual uncle Mi were walking along, they saw a white rabbit run by in front of them. Mi said, "Swift." Dong Shan said, "How?" Uncle Mi said, "It's like a commoner being made a prime minister." Dong Shan said, "Such a venerable old person still says such words." Uncle Mi said, "Then what about you?" Dong Shan said, "Generations of nobility temporarily fallen into poverty." And so basically what this koan is doing is contrasting approaches to practice and awakening, which at first glance doesn't quite seem that way. It just seems like people are walking down a path, they see a rabbit run across, and they have a brief exchange, right? And so, but that's what this is about. And so to break it down line by line here, as Dong Shan and his spiritual uncle Mi were walking along, they saw a white rabbit run by in front of them, and Mi said, "Swift." Perhaps the color is similar to the white robe of commoners. And a white robe is a Buddhist epithet for lay people. And commoner is in the original dialogue. And this is, I always don't get it correctly, juxtapose or in opposition, I guess, or different than a patched robe, where conventionally refers to a home leaver. So you have a lay person and a home leaver. This is just kind of a side note that the author added, but I think it's interesting. So here we have the white rabbit, and the white, it can be thought of in terms of maybe a lay person or a commoner. In East Asia, a white rabbit is commonly seen in the moon, just as people in the northern hemisphere in the West see a man in the moon. So to further elucidate this, so we have a white rabbit, and the white rabbit can be thought of in terms of a rabbit seen in the moon, and the moon is often depicted as wholeness or enlightenment. And so their comments would reflect approaches to awakening. So swift can also be translated as elegant, eminent, or refined. And so if we interpret it from that perspective, it would be a lay practitioner or a commoner appears as elegant and refined. I personally like that view of it, because here you have a white rabbit, which is the lay person. And the question is how did that rabbit become so eminent or refined? And that goes on to the next section, which is Dong Shan said, "How? How did that happen? How did that come to be?" So how did the rabbit become so eminent? And overarching, it's how do Buddhas or great bodhisattvas become elegant and refined? Me said, it's like a commoner being made a prime minister. This implies achieving elevated wisdom through great exertion. And this is often thought of in terms of self-improvement. And this kind of run counter to the teachings that we usually hear around Dharma field, which is self-improvement. What exactly is that? And this can be this was a very vexing question for me for a number of, I don't know, years. I don't know how long it was. And this actually reminded me of a conversation that I think I brought up before with a friend that I had, or that I have. And the conversation was basically, and I know this person has some exposure and experience with the teachings, and his question was basically, is it possible to self-improve to enhance your awakening? So can we do things in our life that would make us more susceptible to awakening? Can we refine our lives to the point that it will help somehow bring out this awakening? And I sensed there was a little bit of confusion in the question, much like I had as well. And so do we stop working out? Do we stop eating healthy? Or do eating healthy, does exercise, does refining or trying to improve our life somehow enhance our ability to awaken? And it might seem that way. It might seem like if we sit meditation enough, if we eat healthy enough, if we do enough good in the world, good actions, that is going to put us in a better position to achieve enlightenment. And so at the base of it, what we're talking about here is a self. And these teachings here, that we've encountered is what is the self that we're referring to? We often, when we look at it through the lens of these teachings, we can't locate exactly what it is that we're referring to when we say I or me, myself. What is it ultimately that we're trying to refine or make better? And so just I think that's a common approach that most of us take when we start looking at these teachings. There are many Buddhist teachings that include various systems of specified stages of development. And in Buddhism and in other traditions, eminence and achievement are often seen as only the outcome of long, arduous struggle. And that was certainly my understanding when I first came into these I want to say halls or Dharma hall, meditation center, practice, whatever you want to call it. I would see people who were wearing the robes and were teaching, giving talks, writing books and this. And I certainly had the assumption that they achieved this wisdom or knowledge or, they gained this understanding through a long process of struggle, and sitting meditation and going to meditation retreats. And as many of you, I'm sure, know, sitting your first meditation retreat is quite it's quite a thing. At least it was for me. I came here my first time sitting sesshin with a friend of mine who sat one sesshin, Soto Zen style, and didn't come back, very put off by the pain that she was experiencing while she was sitting. To the point where she was in tears. And she actually met with one of our teachers here and expressed the concern with how painful it was and how arduous this whole process was. And the teacher, I think did a very good job at, and this is just secondhand information, or I wasn't in the room, obviously. But basically what was said is every retreat is different, So yeah, you might be experiencing some pain in this sesshin, certainly. But, every sesshin is a little bit different. And I certainly, even today, each sesshin is very different. Some sessions I go through a lot of pain and struggle. Other sessions I don't, not so much. And so each moment is different. It's not just sessions, but it's every moment is new. Every moment is fresh and an opportunity to awaken, to see. And it also occurred to me that it's important to have a teacher. Our teachers are very important because they can help point out things to us, like meditation is useless. And I don't know about you all, but when I first heard that, it was kind of off-putting. What do you mean? So I'm sitting meditation retreats, I'm going through all this, and it's ultimately useless. Seems kind of counterproductive in a lot of ways. However, very, very important teaching, because how we usually approach things is that we try to approach things with benefit, for the sense of gain, for improving, or getting something that we don't currently have. And if we approach meditation in this way, it's kind of we'll go through some hardships as a result of that. I know I certainly did. But when a teacher was able to point out that actually what the meditation is useless was referring to, it's that very mind. It's that seeking and that gaining mind that we all struggle with, where we try to get something out of the activity that we're doing. And as soon as we approach something in that way, there's suffering. Suffering comes into the picture with that. So Dangshan said, such a venerable old person still says such words. Perhaps he was ribbing Uncle Me about his view of practice and enlightenment, because he has a different view. Me said, then what about you? Uncle Me is asking about his view of practice and awakening. Dangshan said, generations of nobility, temporarily fallen into poverty. This implies that such eminence is a facet of inherent Buddha nature, and not the attainment of some new status or of spiritual climbing. And again, that's I certainly had that in my mind when I first came to these teachings and practices. When I saw teachers, I saw the robes, and I saw some of the things, that are often a part of this practice. I was taken in by that. Taken in by, I got to get the thing in order to gain this enlightenment that everybody's referring to. And it certainly can look that way. However, as we can hopefully develop our understanding, we're confused about what some of this actually is. And it's not necessarily a sign of a status or a sense of importance, which is common in our society. Buddha nature is already present, and it's not some new state that needs to be discovered or achieved. Wan Song says, if you're first enlightened and then cultivate afterwards, you enter ordinariness from sagehood. Traditional nobility is originally honorable, though drifting destitute in myriad conditions. The basic constitution is still there. This ordinariness from sagehood is counter to what we usually think of. So in my ordinary understanding, my assumption was that you had to go through a process to get to be a sage, or enter sagehood. And what Wan Song is pointing out here is that we actually enter ordinariness from sagehood. And what came up, what I thought of is this is our usual approach. We want to enter sagehood. We want to get that grand thing. We want to get that title or that status of entering sagehood. And with that, we bring in an identity. We take something on, and that's maybe how we would refer to ourselves or other people. And what this is saying is we actually enter ordinariness. ordinary, everyday living. Nothing added to it, nothing taken away, just ordinariness. And it struck me that over the years of practicing with teachers, this is certainly something that I noticed. I know when I first came here, I don't even want to disclose this, but since I opened my mouth, but I remember the first Dokusan that I had with Steve Hagen. I read his book, and I was really impressed. I was, looking forward to meeting the master, and I kind of blew it up in my mind as being this big moment of my life where I was going to finally get to sit down with the teacher, and I put some importance there. And so I was very, very nervous going into that Dokusan. And I remember there was a moment where I was sitting there just kind of in meditation posture. And he just said to me very ordinarily, he was like, "Do you need something?" Or I forget exactly what the words were, but it was just very ordinary conversation. Like, "How's it going?" Or, "Can I help you with something?" And it kind of broke my trance there that I was in, thinking that this was something really important or special. And we just had an ordinary conversation. And that's certainly been my experience over the years, is as much as I attach importance or status to somebody, especially teachers in this practice, what I've seen is very ordinary how people live their lives. And what these teachings and what this practice allows somebody to do, I'm catching myself here, but enables somebody to do is just be who they are, just be an authentic human being without any added stuff that we put on, like the titles and the expectations. All of this can drop away, and it does drop away when we see dukkha, when we see the nature of our suffering. We can see that all of this stuff is just added on to what's actually taking place, and what's actually taking place is just ordinary. It isn't something special. And this is profound. To truly live as a human being, to truly live just as you are, is profound. But it's not profound in the sense of some big grand thing where fireworks go off and we have, all that. It's just ordinary. And just in that ordinariness is profundity. I think that's the right word. A perfect example of this is Norm. I've met with Norm and Dokusan several times, and it is just every single time that I have that experience, it's profound, but it's profound in its simplicity and ordinariness, and just in the brief exchanges that I've had, just in the hallways or in the office, just there's a profound something there, but it's not something. I don't know, I'm getting stuck here. But it's just ordinary. But we're often taken in by the things. We're taken in by the rituals, the robes, because we want to apply meaning or something special to it. Dangshan suggests that the fall into poverty or suffering when practice is engaged is only temporary. And we often hear is that the measure of our practice is how quickly we can come back to here and now. And this suffering, they're saying, is only temporary. Well, it's as temporary as our ability to see dukkha, to see what it is that we're confused about. And we get pulled in, and this practice is forever. It doesn't stop, because our ability to get caught happens all the time. It happens moment by moment. Moment by moment, we can be caught. And moment by moment, we can see, we can wake up. And what we wake up to is exactly our confusion, the dukkha, And that's the first noble truth. All right, so this after generations of nobility temporarily fallen into poverty refers directly to a parable in the Lotus Sutra. And this is according to Taigen Dan Leighton, the author of the book. So I'm going to read this story. In this prodigal son story, a son and father are separated. The son drifts aimlessly and becomes destitute, while the father moves to another city and becomes very wealthy and highly respected. Eventually, the son in his wandering happens upon the estate of the father. The father immediately recognizes his son and sends some assistants to bring him in. But seeing the wealthy, eminent man in front of his mansion, the son is frightened and runs away. The father understands the humble son's shame and dread and sends his assistants, disguised as lowly menial workers, to invite the son to come take a job on the estate shoveling dung in the fields. After a while, when the son feels comfortable with his job, the father has his assistants steadily give the son more responsibilities until gradually, after a very long period, the son is managing the estate. When the father is finally about to pass away, he calls for all of his friends and the nobles and citizens of the city and announces to them and to his son that this really is his son, that they were separated long before, but that now all of my wealth belongs to my son. The sutra goes on to state explicitly that the very rich old man is the Buddha, and we are all like the Buddha's children. So in the sutra, the story is presented by 4 of the Buddha's 10 major disciples, all fully awakened arhats or venerable ones. That story come out okay? Did you guys track that? Okay. So again, the story is presented in the Lotus Sutra by 4 of Buddha's 10 major disciples, all fully awakened arhats or venerable ones. An arhat is the model for practice in earlier pre-Bodhisattva Buddhism. Arhats are personally enlightened beings who have achieved this state through extensive cultivation, often represented as engaged over many lifetimes, indeed entering sagehood from ordinariness, like a commoner becoming a prime minister. All right, so I want to say thank you to Jed. Jed, thank you for the brief conversation before this talk today. I have to admit to you guys that I get a little tripped up with this Arhat business, and Bodhisattva, actually. And so I know in Steve Matushak, when we were sitting Sesshin, the last Sesshin, I think we had a brief conversation about, it was either before or after Sesshin, had a brief conversation that was pretty helpful about this as well. But if we notice here, entering sagehood from ordinariness, which is the opposite of what is being alluded to in the passage before, where we enter ordinariness from sagehood. And so the arhat is on this journey, on this path to get to some state and get to the awakening through a long, arduous process, like a commoner becoming a prime minister. The arhat focuses on personal enlightenment and freedom from samsara. The bodhisattva commits to helping others achieve enlightenment, even at the cost of delaying their own final liberation. Don't think about that too much. In mulling this over and having the conversations that I did, and the book alludes to this a little bit as well, but basically we had kind of maybe a misunderstanding early on, and then Mahayana Buddhism came along and kind of switched things around and went from Arhat to Bodhisattva. The Arhat practices for their own personal freedom and enlightenment. The Bodhisattva opens this up, and it's more for helping others, and even to the point of delaying their own enlightenment. So you are a Bodhisattva when you're not a Bodhisattva. And so we might get the idea in our mind that in order to be a bodhisattva, we have to do good things. We have to help other people. We have to go on this journey of, helping other people to awaken or reach enlightenment. We have to do good things, and that's not necessarily what's being pointed out with this bodhisattva. So you're a bodhisattva precisely when you don't have the idea of being a bodhisattva. This reminded me of the teaching, you have to say something. Is it that we try to help other people awaken? And how does that look? And it seems to me that in the process of having the intention of helping somebody else, it takes away from the actual helping other people. And I can see this in my practice at work, as I've talked about before. I'm a therapist and I help people with mental health and addiction issues. And I've been in the field for about 10 years. And even in my own journey in recovery, which helped me out in my professional life as well. I early on in my recovery, I would say, very attached to outcomes, very attached to see the benefits, that the results of my helping other people. And inevitably what I always saw was my own suffering, because I can't predict. I don't know what is actually helping somebody, and I try to apply that in my current practice, where it's like I meet with people, I use whatever skills I can that I've learned through education, my own personal practices and understanding, to try to help people not suffer ultimately. And there are many methods that I've learned in education and continuing education over the years to help with that. But the results, it seems to me that when I have the actual intention of trying to help somebody, I end up suffering, and the person ends up, I'm a little bit off the mark. I can't be authentically there with the person when I have an actual intention of getting some goal accomplished with the person. The best therapy sessions that I've had are when I can drop all that and just be with what's actually taking place in the moment, without some preconceived ideas of the outcome or how to get the person to the outcome. And so with a bodhisattva, it's like a bodhisattva is a bodhisattva when they're not a bodhisattva, when they're not trying to be something in particular, when they're not trying to do something particular. As we just went over in the Four Noble Truths course, this matter of intention is one of the Buddha's great insights. And so we looked at that, like, where does this come from? Where does this intention come from? Well, it's our our own individual mind, our own plans and designs. I mean, there's more to it than that, but I don't want to go off on that tangent. But we should pay attention to this acting with intention. But when we hear the teaching, you have to say something. I call it a teaching. I don't know if it can say that about it, but we have to say something. So what I'd like to say about that is I don't know where this comes from. I don't know where this desire. It's not a desire. Whatever I say about this is going to be off the mark. But it's when we're seeing clearly, I don't know that this is a choice. I don't know that this is a choice that we have to help other beings, to help all beings. In his awakening statement, the Buddha said, I, the great earth and all beings, simultaneously achieve the great way. And this is profound. This is profound because when we think of other beings, when we think of other human beings, when we see that sense of separation, there's a confusion there. With seeing totality, wholeness, reality with a capital R, we can see that there's actually no separation. And with that, taking care of all beings is right there. It's automatic. It doesn't require thought or intention to accomplish that. There's nothing to be accomplished. So acting without without intention is just taking care of this moment as it's showing up. And just taking care of this moment is going to help all beings. Wondering how that was going to come out. I don't know. Hopefully that made sense. So the Arhats were inspired by hearing the Buddha's prediction that one of their fellow Arhats, Shariputra, I think that's how you say it, will in the future certainly become a Buddha. So the Arhats heard this story. They were inspired because there was a prediction that one of their fellow Arhats were going to become a Buddha in the future. This is important in Buddhist history, I suppose, because this counters conventional or early Mahayana view that Arhats cannot fully realize Buddhahood. So they were with the understanding that Arhats could never fully realize Buddhahood. And with this, they sort of realized, or they were told that this isn't the case. Even Arhats can achieve Buddhahood. And Dangshan, referencing this story, implies his view of the nature of bodhisattva action and of awakening. So another story that the author uses to highlight this koan is the jewel in the clothing and the dragon girl, but I only use one of the stories. So two friends are up late drinking and the guest falls asleep. The affluent host is called away, but first sews a priceless jewel into the guest's robe as a gift to provide for him. Later, the guest awakens and departs. In his travels, he faces hardships and must struggle just to satisfy basic needs. The friends happen to meet later, and the disappointed former host tells his indignant friend about the jewel he still has in his clothing and that he's only suffered want due to ignorance of the jewel. Now he knows he may live at ease. And so here this person didn't know they had the jewel in their pocket as they were wandering around, suffering as a result of this, not knowing that they had exactly what it is that they were looking for, which, is a common reference to our confusion, we are Buddha, you are Buddha. I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit here. So awakening both instantly and in stages. In his verse commentary to this case, Hongzhi begins, matching strength with snow and frost, walking evenly through the clouds and sleet. This connotes the ability of the inherently noble to proceed with equanimity, even through formidable conditions or temporary impoverishment. And so with that, walking through temporary suffering, matching strength with snow and frost, walking evenly through clouds and sleet. This might seem again like something that we would want. We want that ability to walk through hardships in a noble way and be, strong, and it might seem like there's a sense of striving or a sense of improving yourself so that you're able to walk through hardships. But there's no striving or straining with this. There's no, difficulty, even when you're walking in the midst of difficulty with practice and awakening. And this reminds me of the koan, when it is hot, be hot. When it is cold, be cold. This is, we often add suffering onto the moment because of our framework for the situation. If we're in a hot environment, we seek to not be in a hot environment, and that's fine. Again, it might seem like, don't move or don't do something to alleviate the conditions. That's not what's being pointed out. We add suffering onto being hot by the desire to be in a place other than where we actually are. So this walking through snow and frost is the ability to just be here with the moment as it actually is, instead of our usual wanting things to be different than the way that they actually are, moment by moment. So this is not being moved by conditions. Hongzhi then cites a number of elaborate Chinese historical or literary references and concludes, favor and disgrace are disturbing. Profoundly trust in yourself in the real state, one mixes tracks with fishermen and woodcutters. And to profoundly trust oneself echoes inherent Buddhahood. Mixing agreeably with fishermen and woodcutters, conventionally commoners, implies that helpful activity of bodhisattvas amid supposedly ordinary beings. But still, it is necessary then to practice diligently so as to develop and demonstrate awakening qualities. So here we have, what is it? The mixing tracks with fishermen and woodcutters. Some of you longtime practitioners or with understanding, it's like, what is a commoner? What is such as a woodcutter or a fisherman, or a woodcutter or a fisherman? What is mixing with the commoners? We have, I believe it's the 10th precept, where only in delusion do we differentiate ordinary from enlightenment, or ordinary, or awakened beings from non-awakened beings, sages from ordinary. So it's only when we have a deluded view do we see things in this way. And the precept says, not holding a dualistic view of ordinary enlightenment is called the precept of not abusing the three treasures. A follower of the way does not abuse the three treasures, is what we say altogether. And so this is not having a view of, ordinary and enlightened, not having a view of a woodcutter from somebody who is on the path to awakening. As soon as we pick up that view, we're not seeing. We're not seeing reality. We're not seeing just this. And so in that, we can mix freely with whatever all beings that are showing up. So the white rabbit practice. So the practices of Dangshan's Buddha simply remind the practitioner of the inner uprightness, dignity, and nobility of intrinsic awakening. You are Buddha. So this koan actually was pretty profound. It brought up a lot of different things, a lot of different notions that we usually have about practice and the method to achieve what we're commonly looking for, which is the great enlightenment, the awakening. And so there's a couple different ways to, there's the ordinary way of looking at this, becoming, going from ordinary to a state of sagehood, but then it's flipped around, going from sagehood to a state of ordinariness. So Dogen flips all this around, or I don't want to say flips this around, but Dogen's view is that practice and awakening are not separate. He rejected the dichotomy between sudden and gradual enlightenment. And I'm not going to get this correct, but it seemed to me when I was going through this that there was some similarity between sudden and gradual awakening, but I can't talk eloquently about that right now. But practice itself is enlightenment. And so we don't need to go through the struggles. We don't need to get the thing in order to seek what we have. We have the jewel in our pocket as we sit here now. We are exactly what we're looking for. And this is precisely why it seems so difficult to achieve. Because our ordinary way of approaching things is that we want the idea, we want the thing in order to get the other thing. There's always a means to an end. And Dogen comes along and says, you have exactly what you're looking for. This practice and this awakening are exactly the same thing. And this means that the moment one truly practices, you already embody awakening. And I don't know that the word embody is correct here, but you are awakening. You are just this. You are Buddha. Thus, you transcend the dichotomy of sudden and gradual. Awakening occurs in each moment. Every moment is complete in itself. And by the way, this is why our practice can be so helpful, because in our practice, through meditation and awareness practice, we can begin to see this. We can begin to see when we're caught in confusion. And I brought up an example during the course that I was teaching, which I don't know is the best example, but made sense to me. But washing the dishes, at home, I can clearly see when I'm washing the dishes to get the dishes done. I don't like washing the dishes. It ceases to be an enjoyable activity. And when I can, when I don't have goals in mind, when I can just be with what I'm doing, just washing the dishes, saying that it's enjoyable is maybe going a little bit too far, but it ceases to be an activity that causes suffering. And the suffering doesn't come from having to do the dishes. The suffering comes from my own mind and the goals and intention that I'm placing on the activity. That's exactly where the suffering comes from. And this is not just applied to the dishes, but anything we do. If we have intention of doing the activity for a certain reason, there's suffering. That's a part of that picture. So we engage in practice because we are Buddha. We don't engage in practice to become a Buddha. And I wish I would have included in this, when I prepared this, that story of the tile and the mirror, where a master was like asking somebody why they were what they were doing, and the student says, I've been practicing diligently, and the master picks up a tile, and starts polishing the tile. And the student says, what are you doing? What are you polishing that tile for? And the teacher says, well, I'm making a mirror, and the student says, well, no amount of, polishing that tile is going to make it into a mirror. And he says, well, no amount of sitting is going to make you into a Buddha. It's exactly that. When we sit with intention to be something other than what is actually occurring in the moment, we're off the beam. And with meditation practice, we can see this. And it's helpful to look at our own mind and just notice. And it does, I don't know how long it takes, I can't put time to it, but it's always available right here, right now. And I think it does get more, how do I say this? We can become more, I have the word written down somewhere. We can become more aware or more sensitive. We can become more sensitive to when we're caught. With practice, we can see when we're off the beam. And just like I said earlier, the measure of our practice is how quickly we can come back to here and now. All right, I'm done. I don't know why this was a little bit complicated for me to go through. Every time I looked at it, I was like pulling out more things, and there was more things that I wanted to say about this. It's like a never-ending koan to me, so that's what this was like. I pulled out, hopefully things that illustrated what this was pointing to. I'm gonna do this. I forgot to do this on other times that I've gone through koans before. I'm gonna read the koan one more time, and then I'll be done and open it up for questions. So here's the case 56. As Dangshan and his spiritual uncle Mi were walking along, they saw a white rabbit run by in front of them. Mi said, swift. Dangshan said, how? Mi said, it's like a commoner being made a prime minister. Dangshan said, such a venerable old person still says such words. Mi said, then what about you? Dangshan said, generations of nobility temporarily fallen into poverty. All right, questions or comments?